So I was listening to the Bible study going on this morning with the women, and we were talking about families, and we were talking about what makes a good family and how we all like that. Who here would like to have every seat in here filled? Do you remember those days? And then I was asking them if anybody remembers the Crites family, C-R-I-T-E-S family, that used to come here 20, 30, 40 years ago. So when my daughter gets married here on May 30th, her fiancé is Jamie Crites. So we were sitting here talking, and he's walking around going, man, this place hasn't changed any. Oh, man, I love this place. I'm like, okay, when was the last time you were here? And he was telling me that his family, when he was younger, would come here, and he's got family buried in the cemetery. And then I was talking to friends online this weekend. One of them struggling with some personal issues, others dealing with this or that or the other thing. We all are in the same boat. We all have our struggles. We all have those times when we are Barabbas. And I was thinking about this real simple question. Of all these people in the world that we encounter, where is the shepherd today? So now, if you're like me, you probably have a picture in your head, in your mind, of Jesus in a clean white robe, just like the one on the back wall. You know, he's holding a little lamb in a quiet green field. It's a beautiful picture, isn't it? Feels safe. Feels tucked away. Very peaceful. It's the kind of picture that makes us feel like everything is under control. And I remember I look back through every time I go visit mom and dad, and I do every week just about, if not multiple times a week, and every time I'm there, there's another picture that comes out of the photo album. Usually when I was about knee high and I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing. But I remember the moments, and I look at that picture, and it just makes me think of everything is under control. God is mostly found in the quiet, holy places, the places where the grass is trimmed, the pews are polished, and the air smells like wax and hymnals, old hymnals. Everybody take a hymnal out from around their pew. Everybody pick up a hymnal. Just smell it. I can't believe y'all did that. It suggests, because a picture does not ask too much of us. It suggests that the shepherd stays in the pen, and all we have to do is show up at the gate. But if you look at the world right now, the folks at the gym, the coffee shops, the pharmacy, who here has been to Walmart in the last couple of weeks? Talk about finding the lost. All we have to do is show up at the gate. The parents cheering at the soccer fields, the softball fields, people sitting on their front porches on a Tuesday afternoon. It doesn't always feel like a quiet, green field. It feels a bit messy at times. It feels loud. It feels like people are wondering. They're not here on Sunday mornings, but they're wondering, trying to figure out how to pay the bills, how to mend a broken relationship, how to navigate a world that feels increasingly angry, divided, and filled with sharks. We live in a time where people carry deep suspicion and anxiety. Neighbors aren't our neighbors. We're not exactly knocking down the doors of our churches to find the answers. We may have forgotten that many may have forgotten that we're here. Or they assume we have nothing whatsoever to offer, to say to their real world struggles. And that brings us to a hard truth in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 34. Now, to understand the words of the passage that I read, you have to understand the why behind them. Ezekiel was writing to a people in exile. Their beautiful temple had been leveled, it had been decimated, it had been destroyed. Their pews, so to speak, were empty. They were grieving a building, convinced that because the fold was gone, God was gone too. But God, as He quite often does with us, gets a little plain spoken. He gets a little plain spoken with the leaders. He issues a scathing performance review, telling them they were feeding themselves while the flock was scattered all over the face of the earth. None of them searching or seeking for them. See, God was not mourning the building. He was firing the leadership and announcing a divine takeover. He made a promise that should give each and every one of us a lot of hope. Now, has anybody seen any of the Avengers movies? Raise your hand if you saw the Avengers movies. You got to go back and watch them. Because there's this one scene in one of the Avengers movies, the big bad guy, the big baddie, Thanos. He had sent Loki down to try to get this stone that's got magical powers. Go with me, I'm going somewhere. And all of a sudden, at the very end of the movie, in the closing scenes, you see big bad Thanos, and he had just lost the war to get the stone that he needs to try to take over the universe, and he ushers the words that God ushered in Ezekiel. Fine, I'll take care of it myself. He goes, I myself will search for my sheep. This is the heart of discernment. This is a Christ-centered model of surrendering everything we think we know. It's not an administrative task list. It's putting our traditions, our buildings, and our comfort into God's hands and saying, Lord, I surrender all. I surrender my grief over what used to be. Show me where you are already working today. The shepherd has already left the ruins of the old way to go find his sheep in the wild. So let me tell you a story, because I love stories. I'm going to tell you a story about this guy. Let's call him Frank. Frank loved his church with a passion. He was the kind of man who helped fix the roof when it was leaked and sat in the same pew every Sunday for 50 years. He was the first one there adjusting the air conditioning and the heat and making sure all the lights were working. And he was the one who was there after everybody had left, making sure everything was spotless. But Frank noticed that while the church inside stayed the same, the neighborhood outside was changing fast. Has anybody here noticed how the world around us is not the world it was when we were all kids, 50, 60, 70 years ago? The building had become a landmark, a beautiful piece of architecture, but it wasn't a home for the people living just a block away. One Sunday, looking at the empty seats where his friends used to sit, and they no longer sit, where he remembered the children of his friends used to come and make a lot of noise. Frank felt a sharp, heavy grief. The same grief the Israelites felt in exile. He felt angry that the world seemed to have moved on. Felt the nudge of the Holy Spirit going, Frank, quit staring at the empty seats inside and go find them where they are. It was a moment of painful, beautiful surrender. He realized that if he was going to reach the lost, he had to stop being a consumer of a religious service and start being a servant of a living king. When we go out there, our job is not to get somebody in these pews. Our job is to introduce them to Christ by acting and loving and living like Christ. He had to stop being a consumer of a religious service and start being a servant of a living king. He decided to try this thing that I've been talking about for months, called Fresh Expressions. And it basically boils down to this. It's just church in the places where people are already living their lives. One Tuesday morning, Frank went to the local coffee shop. He felt silly. His hands were shaking. He felt like an intruder in a world of laptops and lattes. He tried to talk to a man in a booth, but the man just rolled his eyes. Frank wanted to quit. He wanted to retreat to the safety of the church basement. Does anybody here who loves coffee? I love coffee. Raise your hand. Everybody that does not love coffee, raise your hand. You bunch of sickos. My gosh. Everybody, that's who we need to be praying for. There was a coffee shop in LaVale for years, and it was called Holy Grounds. And it was owned by Paulette and Dave Porter and their families. And I was supporting Paulette, but it was my place to go. I stole their booth. And I didn't steal, I didn't take it out the building. I just sat in there every single 5 times a week. And they were only open 6. And I chose that booth because it had an outlet, one of only 2 outlets that anybody could access. So I'd get there and I'd plug in my laptop and I'd work on my messages, work on what we're going to do next Sunday, work on stuff, and I would just sit. And eventually, if somebody wanted to reach me, they'd call a coffee shop. My mom would call a coffee shop and go, I know he's not going to answer his cell. Tell him to call me. And Paulette would come over. People would leave me gifts and would have lunch prepared for me. And then people would sit and we'd talk and we'd pray. I never once had to deliver a sermon. I just had to sit and listen and be with people. And as Frank sat in his coffee shop, he realized he was walking in an ancient tradition. So I want you to think about chapter 12 of Acts. The early church was in a total crisis. Their leaders were in prison. The doors to the traditional halls were slammed shut. Simon was getting ready to be executed. So what did they do? They didn't give up. They did not give up. They moved into the neighborhood. They gathered in Mary's house. They turned a private home into a powerhouse of prayer. And when Peter was miraculously freed, he didn't head for the synagogue. He didn't head for the temple. He headed for the house. He headed for the place where the Tuesday table was already set. The irony was, when he knocked on that door, they didn't believe it was him. They were so used to the iron gates of the world being locked that they couldn't imagine God had already walked right through them. And like those first believers, Frank had to realize that the shepherd does not need a key to a church building to set somebody free. So he stayed. He practiced double listening, turning his heart to God and his ears to the room. He noticed the sharks in the air, the tension, the fear on people's faces when they scrolled their news feeds. He realized the coffee shop was a gate. Gate just like in Psalm 100. And he saw a barista. Her name was Sarah. Her eyes looked dull, tired. That deep down exile, tired. Just barely able to move, tired. That tired when you stand up and you go, ugh. Who here makes a noise when they stand up? Oh, I know you all are lying now. If I do it, I know y'all do it. That deep down exile, tired. And then Frank whispered, Lord, show me where you are right here in this room. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, the sheep follow him because they know his voice. But the world is loud. It's very loud. It takes moral clarity to hear the shepherd's voice through the political anger and the social division that exists in our world today. We're often tempted to join the noise, to argue, to be right, to judge. But the shepherd's voice sounds like peace. It sounds like an invitation to come home. Frank became a regular. He didn't bring a leather-bound Bible to thump on the counter. He brought a listening ear. He learned Sarah's name. He learned that she was working 2 jobs, trying to balance nursing school and a car that was on its last legs. One morning, Sarah came over to refill his cup, and she goes, "Frank, why do you come here?" Most people just stare at their phones, but you actually look at people. You seem settled, like you aren't afraid of the same things everybody else is. And Frank smiled. "I think this is a place where God likes to hang out. I just want to be a neighbor." Sarah sat in the empty chair, and for 2 long, very long minutes, the coffee shop became a cathedral. I used to be a neighbor, and I could use a neighbor now. She shared how overwhelmed she felt in that moment. The coffee shop became a fresh expression. It was a both-and type of family. The ancient roots, the church, the sanctuary, supporting the new wild growth. Sarah wasn't just tired from her job. She was tired in her soul. And Frank remembered 1 Peter 2. 1 Peter 2. He realized this wasn't about feeling better. It was about the cross. This wasn't a social club. It was a rescue mission. "Sarah," Frank said, "I come here because I once felt exactly like you do. I was trying to carry every single thing myself. But I found a shepherd who died. He died so we don't have to carry that weight alone. He doesn't just want to be your helper. He wants to be your Lord. That means you can stop trying to run your own life, which is a very exhausting thing to do, and let Him lead. Just let the Lord be Lord. Let Him lead. It means trusting that He knows the path even when you can't see the next step. You can decide today to say yes to Him, and I beg everybody to, if you haven't already. She goes, "I've been running forever. How do I stop? How do I let go?" You just tell Him this. You say, "Lord, I've been trying to do it my way, and I'm lost. I believe you died for me. Please take my life and lead me." It's a total surrender. It's giving Him the keys to the car. Sarah bowed her head, and it wasn't a fancy prayer, but it was a moment of decision. She turned away from her own strength, and she reached out for the shepherd right there in the coffee shop. It's among the coffee grinders, the espresso machines, the bagels. She realized God had already found her way. She walked back to the counter, not just as a barista, but as a child of God. And I want you all to imagine if we peeled the roof off of the sanctuary. Sorry, Sonny. I know you spent a lot of time putting it on there. But imagine if we pulled it off of the sanctuary. And then the roofs off of every house in this community. We wouldn't see demographics. We would see hundreds of different Sarahs. We would see hundreds of people in their own version of exile, terrified by the sharks of our culture. The shepherd is standing in their kitchens, in their living rooms, in their front porches, in their back decks, waiting for Frank to say, "I see you. You're not alone." When we choose a third place, we move towards social holiness. We reclaim our identity in a divided world. We stop being people of a building and start being people of a kingdom. This is the radical inclusivity and costly discipleship, the kind that requires us to leave our comfort zones and find ones who are lost. We find the scattered. We look for the people who feel forgotten, who feel alone, who used to go to church, who maybe never went to church. We look for the people who feel forgotten. We enter with joy. We stop seeing the world as a battlefield and start seeing it as a harvest field. We follow the steps. We follow the shepherd to the marginalized, where the work is messy, where our hands get dirty. We open the gate. We help people realize Jesus is the only gate to an abundant life. Now, months later, the Tuesday table had grown. They talked about the Bible, but also how to love their enemies in a world that tells them to hate. Sarah was a sister in Christ. And she said, I used to think I had to find God in a building, but he was looking for me right here in the middle of my mess. I don't know if y'all remember the story of the pool in Bethesda. And Jesus goes into this pool in Bethesda, and there's lots of people around waiting for the angel to stir the water. Jesus sees this man. He walks up right to him. He walked up to him because he couldn't get to the whole living water, so the living water came to the man. Jesus is already there around us. Frank had nodded. He's been here the whole time. We just had to surrender our idea of what church looks like and follow his voice. The shepherd is in the wild today. He's in our communities. He's in our neighborhoods. He's in our coffee shops. He's in our lunchrooms. I hate to tell you this. Everybody lean forward. This is a top secret thing I'm going to let you in on right now. Everybody lean forward. Come on. I got to whisper this. He's even in Walmart. I expect some product placements pretty soon. He's in the wild today. He's calling your name, and he's calling you to go find his sheep. Will you surrender your pew for a moment and find a seat at the Tuesday table? And I got to tell you a story about one of my Tuesday tables. It was Holy Grounds Coffee Shop. I was talking to a friend of mine named Monzel Smith, brother in Christ. We were both attending, we both were attending Lavelle United Methodist Church, my home church, his home church. I had become a pastor, and we were sitting in the corner, we were talking, and the barista stands to the counter and hollers over. By the way, the building was crowded. And she goes, Monzel, your cupcake's ready. Do you want a fork, or do you want to eat it like a man? And we both just died laughing at that moment, Monzel included. We knew we had found a family in a coffee shop of all places. Let's bow our heads.